Hey guys, this is another episode of Why the Pros Play. In this case, we're going to be looking at Malthael, and particularly played by Quaza. Quaza is a European player that has been doing really well before CCL as well as during CCL. Malthael is relatively self-explanatory on why the pros pick Malthael, but there are some things that you may want to know. So, Malthael generally is picked for three reasons. The first reason is macro. He's one of the best double soakers in the game, arguably in the top 3 or 4. He also is one of the few heroes in the game that can do a bruiser camp in the first 2 minutes of the game, which allows him to have kind of that unique opportunity to add macro to the game that no other hero can bring. He also is one of those heroes that you kind of need to focus down first in a team fight, because if you don't, he's going to out-heal the damage that maybe 1 or 2 members of the team can output. He's also pretty decent at bullying specific heroes in the game, so on maps like Braxis, he might be picked as a counter pick to other heroes. For example, we see Liam pick him a lot against URL, since he knows that that is a matchup that's very difficult for URL. But one of the major reasons why Malthael is being picked so often right now in the competitive environment is because the meta is forcing people to play more and more bruisers and tanks. You see people like D.Va, Diablo, and Sonya all being drafted on the same team. In this particular case, they have D.Va and Diablo. They're using a Lucio and a Zeratul. And in this case, you can see the D.Va's going for the camp, which she can solo because she took Full Metal Talent at level 1. But he's concerned because the bottom lane is winning, and that might be because Lucio and Zeratul are missing. So Quaza plays it smart, takes a step back, and says, I can give up a camp because I can clear it pretty quickly, but I don't want to fight on the camp because then I'm going to get dropped by Zeratul. So, and if we were to reveal the vision really quick, you can see that both Zeratul and Zeratul and Lucio were both ready to take out Malthael if given the opportunity. So he did play this out pretty smart. He recognized a bait and stopped himself from getting hit by that bait. And so Quaza plays a pretty good Malthael. And with the current meta, Malthael's really good into all of these heavy bruiser comps that we've been seeing. But on top of that, the way you really take a Malthael and push it further is you run something like a Nano Boost or a Divine Shield. Both of those options allow you to play a lot more aggressive and get a lot more value off. And in this particular case, they're running double heals so that they can have both Nano Boost and Divine Shield, giving Quaza a lot of room to work with when he's going to be joining these team fights. I think it's where he can pretty safely always damage D.Va, Diablo, and Lucio throughout an entire fight. And if you just add in a grenade from Ana, it can prevent a lot of the healing from Lucio, so he just needs to burn through a sound barrier after that. Now, level 4, this is a pretty debated talent tier if you're going to be going with a Nano Boost, because oftentimes if you're going with a Nano Boost, you'll run Throwing Shade so you can enter fights from further away. That comboed with the Death's Reach allows you to really get into a fight from a long distance. Die Alone is generally not used with Nano Boost because you're going to be hitting multiple targets. And on a map like this, where you don't really need to win the solo lane, it's kind of a dead talent. So the choices are usually between Throwing Shade and Black Harvest. If the fight is going to go quick, you generally don't get any value out of Black Harvest, so you go Throwing Shade. If the fight's going to go long, then you want to go Black Harvest. So in this particular case, I think he's thinking that the Nano Boost will run out while the Lucio shield's out there, and he'll still need to have his trade on a bunch of people afterwards so he can continue the fight. And I think that's the reason he ends up going Black Harvest this game. So one of the things that's also decent, but not as good as people make it out to be, is his race is okay. People think that because he has percent health, he actually has really good race, but if you look at something that does a little under 2% of the health, that still takes 50 seconds to kill a target, the Immortal, and these race phases usually are a lot shorter than 50 seconds. And also, I believe it's limited on monster. There's a max amount of damage that it can do, but I don't know the exact percent. So they end up taking this first objective, and they just want to play rather safe. Remember that a lot of his power is going to come down to utilizing that nano boost. If not, he can just get blown up very quickly, because if he gets CC'd or bursted by something like the Diablo, the Zeratul, or the Li Ming, he won't really be able to follow up with very much. So overall, you're going to see that he doesn't play very crazy until then. So for the early portions of the game on Malthael, you generally want to be focusing on macro as well as playing safe. When you start reaching the mid portions of the game, if your team drafted for you to have a good team fight, then you want to play very aggressive in team fights. If your team didn't draft for you to have a good team fight, then you still want to kind of have a little bit of a priority on macro and have a secondary on more of the team fights. When you start reaching the late game, naturally team fights are worth a lot more. So late game, no matter what your team did, you want to be in those team fights. But if your team drafted for you to have a really strong team fight, then you definitely want to play aggressive in those. And if not, you're going to play rather passive, having more of an in-and-out play style. So if you don't have like a nano or a D shield, you want to go in right after they throw a lot of abilities at your tank. You want to do a bit of damage, and then you want to kind of step back while they're getting some of their abilities back, and then you want to jump back in right after they've used it. The playstyle that you guys will definitely want to get good at if you want to play a lot of Malthael in your Storm League as well as in your competitive environment. In this case, you can see he's still playing rather safe. He's just getting safe damage off on the enemies, and he's not diving in too much. He's just hitting their front line and not really going in crazy yet. His team was able to win that first objective and get about 70% of the enemy's fort as well as the front wall. So pretty decent first objective, but I wouldn't say it's too much above average, because that first objective, that's usually about how much it'll get. Now, again, this is something that you can grab camps by yourself at any point. The only downside is that you need to do it when the enemies aren't expecting it. And in this particular case, Zeratul could check at any time, and so he doesn't really want to worry about that chance. So in Storm League, you're going to want to take more risks about soloing camps, especially like neutral and friendly camps, when you've already gotten the soak in those lanes. In the competitive environment, you're going to want to play safe a lot more often. We don't know where 3 of the members are on the enemy team, so if he would have gone to check that camp, he most likely would have died. So again, he's playing a lot safer, and in the competitive environment, you definitely want to get better at playing safer. Because otherwise you're going to get picked a lot. And even in the higher ranks, you're going to want to start doing that. Just watching where the enemies are. If you see all the enemies in another area, feel free to quickly solo a camp or double soak or whatever you need to do. The one thing that Malthael really struggles at is siege damage. So if you find yourself pushing all the way up to the fort, there's usually something better you could be spending your time on. Level 7, we see him taking the Massacre talent. This talent's really good for the level 16 talent, where you can do % health with your W. And so the whole purpose of this build is to get as many W's off as possible. But naturally, he's also going to be taking Tormented Souls, which is going to mark all the enemies at the same time. And it's also going to reset his Death Strike, right? That's what, Wraith Strike. It's going to reset his Wraith Strike more often for him as well, so he can get more strikes off. Even without Nano Boost, you can do something like 40% of everyone's health with just Wraith Strikes and the Tormented Souls by the end of Tormented Souls. So it's a really powerful combo without Nano, but with Nano, you can do somewhere around like 70% of a team's health if they're clustered, and you get a good Nano anytime your Wraith Strikes at the right. It's definitely something that can be very, very valuable. So in this particular case, he can start playing a little bit more aggressive, but he wants to make sure that he doesn't get focused during any of these fights. You're going to see that he kind of just stays a little bit in the back, waiting for everyone to show up. And then when all of the enemies show up, you're going to see he starts playing really aggressive. He gets the Nano Boost, he immediately pops his ult, gets a W before his ult, and then he gets multiple Ws off. He's out healing all of the damage they're doing and constantly jumping around the enemy team. Also gets another W off the cooldown, and at that point, he did half of everyone on the enemy team's health. So where he really hasn't been fighting the enemies throughout this game, he's already second on the damage chart for his team and almost doing more damage than the enemy's Li Ming off of a single fight. He really hasn't been fighting the enemy heroes this entire game. He's been just handling the macros. So he's been keeping up with the experience contribution for his team, keeping his team in the game, because you can see that outside of him, his team wouldn't even be on the same talent tier or level anyway. They'd be on the same talent tier, but they'd probably be down by about a level if he wasn't keeping up with that. Same thing, self-healing. He's in a really good spot. Siege damage, he's in a good spot, but his hero damage is what's really going to start ramping up quickly for the rest of these fights. He uses Wraith Strike to get in so that he can finish off the enemy's air tool as well as burn the Diva's mech. He uses Wraith Strike one more time to just get up to the Diva. And if we take a look at his damage, he got an extra 2,000 at the rest of that fight, which is almost the health of a single hero. So this is really the start of what we're going to be seeing for the rest of this fight, or at least the rest of this game. So now it just goes back to handling the macro side. The first couple objectives of the game in the solo lane, you generally don't push with them. You want to get value in other lanes. So that's exactly what he does. We'll fast forward just a tad. He pushes, but he doesn't want to push too far because he doesn't want to get out of position. And so he's almost has his Tormented Souls back up. Nano's up in 7 seconds. So he does drop back down towards his team to see if maybe they want to go for a play. But they can't really dive too far for this because they don't want all the turrets attacking them. So it's just one of those things that he wants to be with his team in case they want to go in, and they do want to go in. He gets his W, pops his ult, gets another W, and he's just holding down his soul rip so that he can get as much damage off with that. He gets another one of his Ws off and gets even more damage. So where they didn't lead to any kills here, it does kind of prevent the enemies from safely DPSing the objective. He gets his quest completed at 9 minutes in the game, which is a pretty decent amount of time, allows his trait to last a little bit longer, gives the Lucio something else to deal with, and it also gives him more time to be able to get a Wraith Strike off on the opposing team. So now that they're stepping away from this fight, he's caught up to the enemy DPS at this point, and he's also approaching the damage of his team's DPS as well. He does end up dying here, and it was kind of an awkward fight. He dove into that fight without any mana, without Nano Boost available, and without Tormented Souls available. So they might have just done that so that it gave the rest of his team more time to get out, and he didn't really have an escape, but he does still have the inevitable end. So talk a little bit more about his build. And we've seen this build before. I've talked about this build. It is just simply a Wraith Strike build. You go Death's Reach so that you can jump into fights from further away. You go either Throwing Shade or Black Harvest, so again, you can jump into fights further away. Throwing Shade allows you a little bit more of an engage, where Black Harvest allows more of a longer fight. Then you have Massacre, which allows you to have an AoE Wraith Strike, so your Wraith Strike does 102 damage to everyone, refreshing that Reaper's mark on everyone as well. And because it doesn't say it's an untalented version, when you hit level 16, Mortality's 8% hits everyone. Well, level 10, he goes with Tormented Souls. It resets his Wraith Strike as well as applies Mark to everyone. Level 13, he goes Inevitable End, so in case the Diablo jumps on him, he can pop his Unstoppable and get out. And level 16, of course, he's going to be taking Mortality. Level 20, he'll take No One Can Stop Death. That allows him to jump out of... it allows him to play a little bit more aggressive and just be able to reset his spawn. And that's a really powerful talent. It's especially good if you have on a Pale Horse because you can sometimes rejoin the fight that you die in. But it's also just not bad if you want to take the hit for your team. If there's a fight where you have to lose somebody to win that fight, it's awesome to be able to lose someone who can just come right back to life. So again, he's just playing it rather safe. This is, again, one of those fights that I don't know if it's worth them to take. They're going to hit 16s before the enemy team. There is an objective up. He pops his Unstoppable and still gets one more trait off on the enemy just in case, but they end up just backing out of this. They won't have they won't have Nano Boost, but they'll have Tormented Souls. The enemies try to go for this, and this is one of those weird drafts where, like, it looks like the enemies were going to go for, like, a Void Prison APOC, but then their Diablo decided that they didn't want to go APOC because the enemies had Lucio, who could just give everyone 50 armor out of the APOC or Divine Shield. But he went Breath, and then they pretty much just had, like, a janky draft from that point on. So this is a great draft coming out from Crowd Control because it kind of answered what the enemies wanted. So he ends up popping Tormented Souls and immediately jumps in the enemy team. Now, they don't have Nano Boost for this fight, but again, when you're going against two bruisers like this is still a really powerful ult to just pop, use your Ws to get a lot of damage off on the enemies, and just walk right up to them. So the more people draft more and more bruisers, the more valuable people like Malthael and even Q-Build Ragnaros will be. Naturally, Malthael is going to be the best for situations like this, but Q-Build Ragnaros can be a little bit of a budget Malthael if you just are trying to draft things to take a lot of frontliners out, a lot of heavy health frontliners, because where Malthael is going to be applying 1.75% per second, Ragnaros actually does 3% per second while you're at Q-Build. So they both have their different potential. So Malthael heads up here, and again, this is just a testament to how fast he can quickly wipe out camps. In this case, he ends up just wiping out the waves so that Sylvanus can handle the camp. But he can definitely take out camps very quickly, so it's no concern there. There is Nano Boost and Torment Souls available. One of the things that's great about these combos is they have very similar ult cooldowns, so it allows them to engage just about whenever they want to. Now, this was also a great play on his part. He waited, he threw his Shade, hit the enemies, applied the mark, and he waited until the Ana could get close enough to Nano Boost him before he jumped in. Then he jumped in to get his first Wraith Strike off. Once again, use Tormented Souls to reset his Wraith Strike, and then he gets another Wraith Strike off while they're all grouped. And that's enough damage to kind of blow through the Sound Barrier shield, enough to where they're able to take out the Diablo. And now all he needs to do is stay in range to get the next Wraith Strike off. It was a great stun by Diablo. He can only do the Wraith Strike to kill the Diablo rather than Wraith Strike another target after killing the Diablo. So great play from Red Robot on the opposing team, but it's just not going to be enough. Their draft is just really good, and it really enables this Malthael to kind of do whatever he wants to. He's able to quickly jump around these fights and handle them really however he wants. And he's also handling just about any of the double soaking that he needs, or at least the soaking. So as they're about to win this objective, he could quickly go top and push that out if he wants to, or he could just speed up the race. In this case, he's just going to end up speeding up the race. And now we can look at his stats and go, well, he's literally topping everything this game. And yes, he is technically the hybrid carry for this game. He has two different people that are going to be looking to use their abilities to keep him in this fight longer and allow him to play more aggressive. And so that is definitely an excuse on why he is so much further ahead in all of the stats. But just because he's a hybrid carry doesn't mean that it still isn't impressive to have topping literally everything. Oftentimes hybrid carries usually don't end up topping the experience contributed just because they're normally with their team, and so they have to split that experience. So again, he gets a nano boost. He does end up having to pop his R to reset the Wraith Strike a little bit earlier, but even through a lightning breath, he just does not care. And this is kind of the thing that throws me off a little bit when one team drafts like something like this. Is kind of a sloppy draft, and this is kind of saying something because Oxygen is one of the best teams. I believe they're currently second in the rankings, and they're known for having some incredible drafts. Their drafting is great. So it just seems like a little bit of a mistake to draft like these two different things. I think if they would have just gone for the kill on, if they were going to go Brett, they should have just gone for the kill with Zeratul and just had Zeratul just jump in the backline and see if he couldn't like blow up Ana, or at least zone Ana away to where Ana could never get the nano boost off on Malthael. Like, I think there's other options. But this kind of just shows you that if you have a better combo than the opposing team, you can almost ignore what the opposing team was planning on doing. This is something that I try to do when I'm coaching teams a lot. I try to give them a very efficient combo that's easy to do. And I tell them, like, hey, you can draft to counter the enemy's combo, or you could draft to, like, have a stronger combo on yourself. And you can do a little bit of both. You could have, like, your 2 or 3 heroes needed to make your combo work, and then pick 2 heroes to counter the enemy combo. And if you do something like that, then you could just focus on doing your combo every time, and you'll win way more often than you lose. I usually tell teams, I say, would you rather draft to win the game or draft to not lose? And so many teams that I see before I start coaching them, they're like, oh, well, we just change around our draft based off what the enemies pick. And it's like, no, you should probably pick the first few things that you need to really close out a game, and then answer the opposing team's combo. And exactly what happened here. They drafted the Nano Malthael, and they knew that they could lead to a game as long as that was kind of unopposed. And then they just drafted a single Uther to kind of answer the APOC combo. And because they had those two things, they didn't really need to care about anything else. And that's the greatest part about this. The enemy's lightning breath and everything, they can literally just walk right through, and watch his health. He just does not care. And they even have a Divine Shield to just guarantee that he's just unaffected by the opposing team. And that's all they have to do. I mean, they tried to send the D.Va in the backline, but it was already too late when they did that. And so that's the thing that's so funny about this. So at this point, they'll be able to quickly take down the opposing keep. They shouldn't have too much of an issue because they have Sylvanas to turn off part of it, and they don't need to worry about the enemy Diablo, and so they just kind of walk in at this point. Now that they have this, they most likely can't close out the game. The enemy Diablo is going to be up in time, and the Immortal's down to half health. We also have the Malthael at lower mana, and that's really his biggest crutch as a hybrid carry. Most hybrid carries in the game usually either have mana bars that are just really efficient, or they have no mana bars. Or at least they have a method to get their mana back. For example, Vala was used as a hyper carry for a long time, and she had a talent that pretty much gave her as much mana as she would ever need. That level 1 talent that, as long as she's at 10 stacks, she just is gaining so much mana back. The challenge about running Malthael as a hyper carry is that when that nano boost goes out, yes, it gives you 200 mana initially, but you will shred your mana bar very, very quickly. So you almost have one about 10 to 15 second fight. And outside of that one 10 to 15 second fight, you really can't take much of a longer fight after that, just because you will burn out of mana. So keep that in mind, that if you are running a comp like this, you need to make sure the fights go fast, and you might not want to take a second fight afterward. You want to just take your one fight and kind of back up. But with that being said, they will be approaching level 20s first. This is an area where Ana doesn't need to take the upgraded nano, but it does make your job a lot easier as Malthael, because you will have a lot more healing if you're not stunned. Same thing with Uther. He doesn't need to take the upgraded ult, because where you probably aren't going to be close enough to people to get the AoE version of it, so the only benefit you get is that extra second. It's almost better for Uther to just take the redemption, so he could just revive right after. But this is very open for your team to take whatever they want. 20. It's just you're generally going to want to take No One Can Stop Death. The increased duration of the Reapers definitely doesn't matter if you're going to take Black Harvest. No One Can Stop Death is always good, especially if you're the hyper carry. If you get picked at the start of a fight, you could return and still have a really good team fight. So right here, a great setup. The Murden jumps in, lands a stun, followed up by Rutzo's stun, and now he gets the mark on the enemy, but he's waiting for the nano boost before he jumps in. He gets the nano boost and then he jumps in, gets out of range of the enemy D.Va's diverting power damage reduction, and now he just goes and starts melting down Diablo. He does a lot of damage to Diablo, does a lot of damage to Lucio, and does a lot of damage to D.Va. He's trying to kill the D.Va before she can mech again. Once he realizes he can't do that, he kind of just steps away and starts going back onto the Lucio. He's getting rather low here, so they end up just backing off. But getting rid of the Diablo at the start of this fight is really nice, and they're able to pick the Zeratul as well. Even if the Zeratul succeeded there, all that would have done was pop the No One Can Stop Death, and they still would have been able to close out the game right here. So overall, he still had an answer, even in the worst case scenario. But it ended up turning out pretty good for his team, and they are able to grab this Immortal and close out the game. So naturally, if we've learned anything for why Malthael's played, he's played because he's a macro machine. Even on maps that he's not a macro machine, though, the competitive teams will sometimes pick him to counter heavy tanky teams or bruisery teams, or if you just simply combo him with something like Nano Boost, he's an incredible hero that can get a lot of value. I say something like Nano Boost. Nano Boost is definitely the best option for this because it lowers his cooldowns they recharge 150% faster. But even something as simple as a Malfurion throwing an Innervate could actually be pretty powerful. It doesn't give him the spell power, and it doesn't give him 150%. It's just 50% faster. But something as simple as that can be enough to still be rather scary, and the extra healing over time is kind of nice. Plus, Malfurion can cleanse them from a much further location if needed. So it is a possibility. Definitely the top tier is Ana Malthael, and but outside of that, I think this is one of those times where it's like, this is great to run Ana, and it's great to run Malthael. And this is what I love is when the teams use this. I said in a previous video that Ana was being drafted too much because people were drafting her when Nano Boost wasn't even a good thing. And so this is kind of the testament to why you want to run Nano with the right people, because Nano with Malthael is insanely good to the point that it just hyper carries against most teams. So again, we see that he's just absolutely rolling through the opposing teams, and they just don't care about what the enemies even have planned, because their comp just does what it does so well that they just don't care. Now he's out of mana, so he ends up just backing out of this, but they have a full shield, full health Immortal that should be able to take out the enemy core without much of a hassle. We see that he ends off with almost 100,000 in Siege, over 100,000 in hero damage, 34,000 in self-healing, and the enemy Sylvanas ends up overtaking him in the experience contributed, but he did do really well in the early portions of the game with that. So, to kind of explain one more time, he's drafted either for macro or to combo or to purely counter. And as far as the early to mid to late portions of the game, if you're on a map that you can double soak, you generally want to be focusing on double soaking. If the lanes are covered, you want to try to grab a quick camp, since he is one of the fastest camp clears for things like bruiser camps that have 3 or 4 targets that you can just melt at the same time. You out heal most of their damage, so you don't even need to really do like the kiting or anything that you might need to do with someone like Jaina. And so it allows him to do cams easily, quickly, and safely in the early portions of the game. And you will just focus on getting that macro, double soaking, and camps in the early to mid. Even after the first objective, you usually just go back to double soaking to keep your team in the game and with a lead. When you start reaching the mid to late portions of the game, you will need to start approaching team fights a lot more. And if you are drafting with an Ana, you can play pretty aggressive in those team fights. If you are not drafting with an Ana, you will need to play more with that in and out playstyle. Use your E to get marks on the enemies, jump in, get a couple hits, and then just leave that fight. Get ready to jump back in again after the enemies are focused more on your tank once again. And that is how you play Malthael, and this is why the pros have been playing Malthael a lot more in CCL and in some of these European and Korean tournaments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and feel free to check out my other videos.